Welcome to BAM It with John, Michael, and Mari, covering all things business, accounting, marketing, management, and IT. The place where businesses and entrepreneurs find the forest through the trees.
Hello and welcome to BAM It. Of course, this is Mari Peterson with Marketing Outpost, and I have with me...
I am John Michael Kledis with Peridot Consulting.
And we are also your sponsors of the BAM It podcast. And today we'd like to thank you for joining us. We are going to be talking about the accounting industry. So, first of all, let's start off with an interesting fact about the accounting industry. Do you have an interesting fact, John Michael?
Silly facts, just sometimes you might not know what accountants are involved in. Like they are the ones that hold the ballots for the Oscars.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about something more nefarious. So,
well, if the FBI, that's not nefarious, but if you want to go to the FBI, they look for criminal investigators or police background. But then the other spectrum is accountants.
Yeah, they do forensic accounting.
There's a lot of forensic accounting in the FBI, and they're the ones who brought down.
Also, the mafia, they always utilize a really good accountant.
Yeah, the accountants are the ones that caught Al Capone in the FBI.
Well, there you go. And you know what else? There are also accounting people that do something other than accounting. Like famous people? Well, semi-famous. So the 2013 Miss USA pageant winner was an accountant.
Wow.
Did you know that?
I did not.
There was a former Australian prime minister who is an accountant.
Okay, so you're fishing far if you go to the Australian prime minister to find a famous accountant.
I'm sure there's a movie about an accountant, and wasn't he like
Ben
a
Affleck.
hitman? He was a hitman.
Yeah, that was based off of my my last career.
Okay.
The accountant. It was back when I was a...
So the point is, I think accountants
joke,
are way more interesting than people would think about, because what is the stereotypical thing that people think about when it comes to accounting?
Boring. Like just dull number cruncher.
Don't they usually think white guy with glasses?
Probably.
And aren't you a white guy with glasses?
I am a white guy with glasses, yes. Yeah. No, the fastest way to end a conversation at a cocktail party is tell people you're an accountant. And
what happens? Do they just walk away?
They just kind of say, oh, and then kind of walk away. No, I'm really insecure at cocktail parties because I don't know how to elaborate on what I do, because accountant is like a very short and sweet, I'm an accountant, but that spectrum.
But if you said, I'm an accountant for the mob.
Yeah.
That would be more interesting.
I don't think... First of all, A, I'm not, so let's just make sure that's fully aware. But B, if I were, I don't think I would be going around telling people at the cocktail party I was an accountant for the mob. But
you could say you're an accountant for the gutter trade. The gutter trade could be drugs. It could be
so that's the only
women of the night.
So the only way accountants
I'm sure that people who are women of the night or strippers, they need somebody to maintain all their
ones, all their dollar bills. Yeah, so I guess accountants are dull, but when you think of it in a nefarious light, with obviously the mob or illegal activities, I guess at that point accountants become very interesting.
Well, one thing that you got me on not that long ago was that series, The Ozarks.
Yes.
And wasn't he an accountant?
Yeah, he was an accountant that...
and he helped launder money.
Yeah, he laundered money for the Mexican drug cartel.
Have you ever thought about that as a second career?
I have not. I enjoy life and not jail. And you don't have to break the law to be a successful accountant. You can be completely legal.
Okay.
I appreciate where this conversation is going. It's really making me feel like to be interesting. Accountants can be interesting and legal too. So I'm the other side. I'm actually a forensic accountant that investigates fraud.
That's legal.
Well, of course, everything I do is legal, unfortunately, for the interest of this podcast.
Well, let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's talk about your background a little bit. So we've touched on some of these things in the past. But one thing that you do is you don't run from the law, but you were a runner. And you were doing like half Ironman things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I wish it was more in the present tense because, I haven't been doing it as much. But no, I mean, I was a big runner. I've run 10 plus marathons. I've done a few.
Like complete marathons, the whole 26
Oh,
and
yeah.
something miles?
Yeah. So a marathon's 26.2. I've
Wow.
done 10 plus. I've done ultra marathons, which an ultra marathon is anything more than 26 miles.
Good Lord.
So a couple 30-mile runs I've done.
You told me one time that you used to run from King Creek, which is in Fairview, up to Lake Lure. Did you really do that?
Well, that was a bike. I biked that.
And so you used to bike too?
Yeah, so I was a big biker, did a few 100-mile plus bike rides. I've done some half Ironman and Ironman, big triathlete. So an Ironman is over 2 mile swim, a 112-mile bike, and then a full marathon after that, all at once. And I did it. It took me about 13 hours.
Now,
to
were
do
you
it.
doing all that while you were also in the practice of accounting?
Oh, yeah. So I've been an accountant my whole life, professional career since early 2002 when I left ETSU and I had a degree in accounting and a double major in marketing. I actually went into college, started my major in marketing, and at the time I wanted to go to New York City and work for a big advertising firm. And
you were going to be Mad Men.
I wanted to be a madman, yeah. And that changed. You know, I'm the youngest sibling of 3. My brother is also an accountant with now a big accounting firm, and he does international tax. But at the time, I thought that he was going to do the hometown accounting route so I can kind of pick my career. He chose to go big city accounting and left the hometown firm as an option. So then I decided to take that. So I came home to Asheville.
Is he older or younger?
He's 3 years older than I am. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby. But now he works for a big accounting firm, and he's actually now in Tokyo doing international tax. It's very interesting what he does. Very cool.
So another part of your background, before we jump back into your career, is you're also a home brewer. And you've won some awards.
Sure.
Stop being so shy about it. You drink beer and you run, or you make beer and you run.
Yeah. I mean, I'm home brewer.
So what else do you? So we've talked about that one before. Tell me something else that your listeners would not know about you.
Oh, I don't know. I've got 3 kids. I have no clue what people wouldn't know about me. Other than that, I'm kind of a monotone.
What's your favorite genre of movie?
80s action.
You also like Hallmark Christmas movies.
Sometimes the Christmas spirit needs a boost. And a Hallmark Christmas movie could do that.
So what do you do in your downtime?
Just a lot of family time. You know, we're not big on anything extravagant or anything. Just, I mean, we've got 3 kids. They're each about 4 years apart. They're in 3 different schools. So people always ask that. And
you do a lot of driving, actually.
It's a lot of driving. I'm always like, look, I'm busy as heck. I'm nonstop busy, but nothing ever changes, you know? So I'll see people in 2 years. Oh, how's it going? What have you been up to? Pretty much the same thing, but I've been nonstop busy between then and now. But, you know, it's all good. I wish I had more of an interesting story.
Well, I think you're pretty interesting. So let me ask you now, beyond the secret things that we might know about you or your guilty pleasures, what is your favorite food?
I grew up very picky, so I like, you know, pizza and
Pizza is picky? Pizza's not really a food group, you know.
Well, I like cheese pizza and margarita pizza, so that's pretty monotone.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't get very adventurous.
So you are starting to reinforce potentially the boring part.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can be pretty boring. That's
all right. So let me ask you another question. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you do that is beyond the contrary to the stereotype of accounting?
Yeah. So I mean, I do a lot of talking with clients, a lot of meetings. It's not like, you know, I'm holed up with a closed door office and working on spreadsheets. I mean, I'm probably on the phone for 50% of the time I'm doing anything. And it's a lot of consulting. You know, I'm in the public accounting realm. And there's when you talk about the accounting industry, accountants can be there's internal accounting and there's public accounting, there's auditing, there's tax. So I'm in the public accounting realm, which means I service the public. Internal accounting means you work for like a big company and you work in their accounting department, or you're their CFO for that one company. So I just want to make sure.
In-house.
In-house. And they do their own things. I do public, so I service clients and I talk to a lot of different clients. That's probably my favorite part, is that connection, that trust. I have a lot of people that come to me when it comes to taxes or just starting a business. They're very brave in going out and starting a business, but it's scary because there's so much stuff within the bureaucracy of America to run a business. From taxes all the way to business licenses.
Well, that probably taps into your other degree, which was in marketing. So you kind of get to combine the two when you're helping somebody start up a business.
Marketing comes in play a lot. It causes me to step back, be a little bit more empathetic. It causes me to see end results a little bit, or end parameters. Sometimes I'll be an accountant and I'll get wonky and say, okay, let's do an S corp. You got to do this, take these draws or whatever. But the marketing side gets me to come back and kind of have that general base conversation with them and where they're going and what are they trying to do, and kind of have a little bit of an outside in perspective. And it floods into tax advice and business advice wholeheartedly when I do that. So I've really enjoyed having that marketing degree. I got the when I went into college, I got marketing because my father, who's an accountant, when I was thinking about doing, what should I do? He said to me, he was like, the most important part of any business is marketing. And this isn't a career accountant that told me this. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do marketing then. So.
And then you found you liked it.
Yeah, I loved it. It's definitely the fun side of business, marketing. It's stressful. It is the most important, because if you don't get your product to your end user, then you're not accomplishing, how well your balance sheet is, and you do your debits and credits doesn't matter.
Right.
And marketing it, just to dumb it down to its base, is getting your product to your end user, period. However the means you do that. So
what would you say then is, it sounds like that's the best part about your industry, or what do you think is the best part about your industry?
Yeah, I mean, the best part is, the old Hamilton song, if those Hamilton fans out there, where they say, I want to be in the room where it happens. When you're the accountant, you're in the room where it happens for a lot of these small businesses. You're a lot of times the first person they talk to. You're trusted. I remember talking to another accountant randomly at some networking thing, and he said to me that accountants are the most trusted advisors that businesses have, and it just kind of made me realize it's both a responsibility and a burden, or it's you can be nervous about it.
Well, people are very, I think, skeptical and afraid of sharing their financial information, so there has to be a high level of trust to tell you, and the truth about their financial standing. Well,
and it's funny because people will be insecure about that. I'll have friends that are like, oh, I really want to use you, but I just,
I don't want you to know the real truth about my problem.
It's funny how when I don't look at it, a lot of people, if you're not an accountant, I can understand from outside in saying, oh, you're looking at these people's wages and, there's judgment. It's, I don't want to say you're numb to the numbers, but you're not looking at like the gross. I could have somebody come to me with $1 million, and I could have some of income, and I could have somebody come to me with $100,000 of income, and I'm not looking at that million or $100,000 any differently. It's just weird how you train in on, all right, where's that $100,000? What's the cost of goods sold? What's the percentage of your
I'm sure it's like a doctor. Here. Eventually, they just get numb to seeing all the naked bodies.
And I'm more looking, because it's all it is to me. And there's a term in accounting that I kind of hold tightly to myself. The term is materiality. Materiality doesn't have a really good definition, but materiality comes to play. It's when a number is significant. So I look at those numbers to get that innate feeling of materiality. So if I see $1 million, I'm like, all right. So if we see this miscellaneous expense of $10,000, that's okay. That's relatively immaterial. But if we see $100,000 and we see a miscellaneous expense of $10,000, well, that might be material. So let's figure that out and do something about it. So it's more in the concept of materiality. If I'm doing a tax return and somebody makes $50,000 a year and they owe $3,000 in taxes, that's way more material. And I'm going to look at it and see what we can do about it. If they make $1 million and they owe $3,000, that's not very material. So it's not, going to be a burden. That's how I look at the numbers, only to hone in the concept of materiality, not in a judgment of, oh, this is how much you make. So it's a weird paradigm to look at. And I'm probably by the end of that concept and stuff, I'll be walking down the street and run into a client. It's not like I see that client and suddenly all their, last year your gross income was $1 million and blah, blah, blah. That's not what flows through your head at all. And I'm sure people get insecure of that. But it's more just, like I said, it's all materiality. That's the only time the amount of the money matters. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to my business, where I'm really not judging somebody's business based on what I know about their marketing.
Yeah.
And
you may know their revenues or whatever. It's more like the materiality. Oh, okay, so if you're X amount, this is our budget and this is what we got to work with and to do with your goals. It's not like, oh, it's only that, So people get insecure about that. And I'm always try to relay that, you really shouldn't. There's no judgment. And if anybody, the old saying that he who is without sin cast stones, it's like if anybody came to me who was insecure about money and finances, it's like, I promise you,
you have the same issues.
I have the same issues and I'm in there. It's not like I'm sitting on
just like marketing, I do too. I have the same issues with my own business that anybody else does with theirs.
And of course, I've always say this is the old adage that the doctor is the worst patient. I may give the best accounting advice, but it doesn't mean I'm necessarily following it myself.
So then what would you say is the worst part of your work or the industry?
Well, me specifically with taxes, it's a lot of stress. And what I mean by that is
it the timeline stress?
No, it's the oversight.
Oh,
so like say if I just mess something up and I've got more the State Department of Revenue, the IRS, the State Department of Commerce, the client.
Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh my God?
Well, the bank, I've got all these end users that will be more than happy to aggressively point out a mistake I made, and every time I click send on an e-file, it's a nerve-wracking moment because it's like, okay, and I mean, there's internal controls, there's experience, I've been doing this. You are
the middleman.
But I'm the conduit, if I click send on that e-file and I don't know, I'm not trying to like say this out, but I mean, if there was something wrong, they're going to get attacked.
That's a lot of responsibility. I'm sure that's why, as a profession, you're required to have certain licenses and certifications and ongoing education. And I think those other professions where it's not necessarily required, such as mine, marketing does not require a license or certification. So I can give you all kinds of bad advice, and nobody really, except for the client, is going to come back to me about that. So I can see not having that pressure for myself, because I wouldn't like that kind of pressure, knowing that some governmental body could come after me, not only fine me, but worst case, imprison me or something like that.
Well,
I've made marketing mistakes on behalf of my clients, and I have to eat them. They just cost me money and a little bit of shame, but it's not the same thing as having responsible.
And it can be, I mean, for the most part, there's zero, if you have nothing to worry about, you have nothing to worry about. But it's always, you're like, what, if there could be something I just didn't know and I should have known. But you don't know what you don't know. You just never know what you don't know, right? And some people
feel like that was a tongue twister.
Well, I mean, that's a Donald.
Know what you don't know.
That's a Donald Rumsfeld term. He said it back in the day, but I use it a lot because it's true. Because like, say I do your tax return and I didn't know that you had 10 rental properties because you never told me you had 10 rental properties. You just gave me your W-2. So I file it and you get audited and they're like, well, she's driving a Lamborghini.
How could you not know that?
How could you not know she had 10 rental properties? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe her boyfriend bought it for her, right? You just don't know what you don't know. And it's not the tax preparer's job to necessarily audit every client or investigate. If you came to me with a piece of paper and said, my income was this and that's it, and you gave it to me, I could do a tax return on that and it's on you. And the end user in reality is the client, so they should definitely review the tax return. And if they sign it or attest that that is it, then that's it. But
I'm sure accountants get, I think, probably blamed for a lot of things that get missed, unduly so, because, say, take, for example, our local government, our own Buncombe County head manager got busted with a lot of financial fraud. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the community said, how come the auditors every year didn't catch it? Yeah. And, it wasn't necessarily in their purview, right, to try to investigate. Nobody told them there was a fraud situation, right? Yeah. So I think they got blamed for that, even though it really wasn't necessarily their fault. They're reviewing what is being given to them.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying that is probably the most true saying I've ever heard when it comes to accountants, that accountants are the last to think and the first to blame.
Got it. That sounds pretty good. So let's segue into then, what would you say are some of the challenges? Not the worst thing, but some of the challenges you face or that is within the industry. Well,
within the industry, there can be a lot of challenges. It's the way the industry is changing. It's going from staff-oriented patriarchal firms or bigger accounting firms. And you're either going to be one of those or you're going to be like just a one-man show. And there's very few in between. So the challenges are differentiating yourself, establishing that experience, showing people the difference between that, why one is better, when one would be better, keeping up with, the changing technology landscape. We can get to technology in a minute. So the industry right now is having a major change. I remember when I went into college and I had to write a paper. It was either in a marketing or an accounting class, but I wrote the paper on the effect of technology on the modern day accountant. And this was back in 2001. And it truly is, at that time, we foresaw the changes of the industry, but it's taking it even further. And I don't want to segue into the technology segment, but for example, one accountant can do the bookkeeping today, just one person, that a staff of 6 were doing 15 years ago because of, the cloud-based accounting and the downloading of transactions and things like that. So the efficiency is way more there, but there's an experience gap as well. So it's causing there's a shortage of experienced good accountants. So come tax season, accountants are swamped. One accountant is doing way more tax returns because the price per return is coming down, but also the volume. One accountant can do more, where it used to be like 6 accountants to do a tax return. Now one can do it because of the software, but now they're doing a lot more. So there's a lot of challenges with the changing industry, keeping up with it. Growing within that paradigm, growing a firm as it's changing rapidly. A lot of industries are changing rapidly because of just the pace of things. I've read articles that, accountants is a dying profession because of automated. I'm never going to think that, because anytime the end user is a human, you're going to need a human on the other side of that. So if the end user of a balance sheet is going to be a human interpreting that, you're going to need a human on the other side, even if it's not on the input side, but on something. So the accountants are always going to be there. But they're not going to be the stereotypical green visor accountant sitting in a setting, punching numbers and stuff. They're going to be on the analytical side,
helping you to analyze what's actually going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a perfect time to take a break.
Okay.
And then when we get back, we'll talk about some of the opportunities in your industry.
This podcast is brought to you by Peridot Consulting and Marketing Outpost. Peridot Consulting offers a new paradigm in accounting services. We work with individuals and businesses toward prosperity and financial happiness. Please visit www.peridotconsultinginc.com for more information. Marketing Outpost provides strategies to solve problems and strategies to grow your business. Please visit www.marketingoutpost.com for more information.
Okay, so we're back with John Michael, and now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about what do you think are some of the opportunities that are facing your industry?
Well, so I think the industry's got sort of an aging element to it. So I think a lot of the old guard baby boomers, there were a lot of accountants in the baby boomer generation. That's back in that generation is when the accounting industry sort of was in its heyday, I think. The public accounting industry sort of took off. So there's a lot of opportunity for younger firms in the fact that there's a lot of aging out now. So there's going to be a fill void there as far as clients, service and stuff. But there's also, because of the industry, the paradigm of the accounting industry right now is very old school, that there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of the new modern day situation that the other firms just have a infrastructure and a order base that is just not willing to even go there or even consider it. I've been in other accounting firms and if you just introduce things that might be as mundane as paperless, or if you talk about doing like a share screen, just simple stuff, there's a big pushback into, well, that's not how we do things. And it's even to go light years beyond the tangible of those aspects, but just to embrace the transient nature of today's economy or today's business culture, to where, it's clients are amazed, like, oh, you're going to come to me? I thought I was going to come to you, sit in your waiting room and go meet, or the accessibility, just little things that I think the modern day environment demands. But the old accounting structure of these older firms, or even the firms that aren't old, that are continuously changing, but the infrastructure they've developed, have a hard time adapting to or integrating within their things. So if you have a firm that's growing within this, you can embrace that infrastructure to take advantage of where these other accounting firms are falling short in that service. It's funny how the biggest thing I'll get when I get new clients from old accounting firms is they just wouldn't reply to my email. Something as simple as that. Just talking to your client, because like we were saying earlier, accountants are your most trusted advisor, the first person you talk to. These are very scary things, taxes are, or they're big things. I'm starting a business or I'm buying a business. And if your most trusted advisor isn't replying to your emails or calling you back, and if you've been with them for 20 years, it's scary. It's like, I need the help and I need that response. And if you're not empathetic to where these people are coming from, that this is a big deal to them. It may be something that you see 15 times in your inbox every day, but behind every one of those emails, it's a big deal to a client. And that little bit of extra touch goes a long way.
I think that's a shift, though. We're also seeing in other industries, legal, medical. I mean, we created a structure before over years of, here's our office, come to it. Very infrastructure is, I just think of a big behemoth cement building,
Yeah.
And I think now it's being deconstructed. You go see a lot of your clients, and I think it's more efficient. So you're spending your money differently than, I think companies in the past. But then you also you're mentioning something that I think is really important, and you've said this in the vision for your company, that relationships matter. I think a lot of people say that. It can sound very much, everybody's saying relationships matter. But in the accounting industry, I think it's a little bit different, because accounting professionals, like legal professionals and medical, had a tendency to separate themselves and put themselves kind of on a platform higher up, and what you've really done is put yourself not down, but what you're saying is, you're very important to me. You don't have to talk to my staff accountant or my front desk, receptionist first. You can just call me directly. And I think that's very unusual. I think that's a huge change from the traditional model, where I'm sure they said relationships matter too, but it's a different meaning, I think, now today.
Well, yeah, and sure, relationships matter, but if you just say it, or do you do it?
That's what I mean. I think it's a very different way that you approach it versus the way it used to be.
Yeah, and we've got, Peridot, we've got a vision and mission statement, and our vision is relationships matter. And we went back and forth on that, on what we wanted our vision to be, because a vision's a long shooting where you want to go. But we kept coming back at the end of the day. That's what it was about, and that's what Peridot is about, is that relationships matter. And it's not only with the clients and our external things, but also internally with each other. And it's all about garnering that. So in 10 years, we want to just keep our eye on that vision, that at the end of the day, that's the culture Peridot is doing, is that relationships matter. Because I learned that. They say, learn not necessarily from failure, but learn from what you've done. And I've seen where the clients will come to me, and that's just the most important thing. And I've seen other accountants say, well, it's all about the relationship because I'm a trusted advisor. But then, they don't reply to emails, or you call them and you're going through a voicemail system and you're talking to a staffer, and you're not just, so we made sure we put that front and center in the vision of our company, that relationships matter, because it is an important thing. And I hope to always keep our eye on that vision.
Well, and I think defining that helps. So that's a huge opportunity for this younger generation, is to realize that you have technology, but how do you really demonstrate to your clients that really that relationship does matter? As
I was saying earlier, if technology changes the accounting paradigm altogether, if your end user is a human, on the other side of that needs to be a human, because humans' relationships matter.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you, where do you see the accounting industry in the next 5 to 10 years? What does the future look like?
Well, I see there being either some big box accounting firms, and big box, I don't know if that term's correct, but just big conglomerate accounting firms that keep conglomerating each other up. And then a lot of just single...
That's a different way of putting it, conglomerating each other.
Yeah.
That's highly technical.
Trademark. Versus a bunch of just like one, gig economy sort of perspective bookkeepers. That's one person. They have like 8 clients, and they just do that one thing. There may be a tax accountant that's just got his, 50 to 250 clients, and that's all they do. The one-on-one thing, maybe a couple. But there's also, in 5 to 10 years, I think there's going to be a weird, I think the college graduates or people going into college are going to not be doing accounting much, because the barrier to entry is going to be harder. And what I mean by that is, if you're a college graduate in accounting and you're like, okay, I want to be a public accountant, your option at that point and more is just going to be a big box accounting firm, because there's not going to be a training infrastructure anywhere else. Because accounting, you need the training. College will teach you the theory, but accounting, you need the training.
You got to do some hands-on stuff and be guided by somebody.
You've got to. And experience, there's so much nuance and experience, especially in a public accounting. Or if you get into, there are other aspect of accounting that I haven't even touched on, is auditing. So much training you need in all of that. You can learn all you can, but you need the training. I'll talk a minute about the difference between a bookkeeper and an accountant. Is you can not go to college, not learn anything, and you can go in and be a bookkeeper. You can learn QuickBooks very well, be a QuickBooks Pro advisor, know that program, and you could be a bookkeeper. But that's just all experiential learning and learning on the fly. That's fine. And this is the difference between an accountant and a bookkeeper, is you can go to college, you can learn how to do accounting, you can learn the theory behind it and everything. And if you do that, and you're on, once you graduate college, you're going to have the bookkeeper, and then you're going to have the accountant. But that bookkeeper is going to have all the experience, but they're not going to have the wide vision. So then the accountant needs that experience. And an example I always use is a bookkeeper is the person swimming in the pool, and the accountant is the lifeguard with surveying the pool. They're the ones that see everything going on. There's a major difference between bookkeeping and accounting. Bookkeeping is a subset of accounting, and I just want to make sure that there's a disclosure there, because bookkeepers are awesome. They're an integral part to many businesses, but they are not accountants. And it's important to disclose that. And there's plenty of accountants that do bookkeeping, But it's not the other way around, because I'll see that a lot. I'll see somebody that's like, oh, well, she's done my books for all these years and did the taxes. And you look at this and they really shouldn't have been doing that. But I don't know. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
All right. So now I want to segue into technology.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would assume that technology has been something negative for accounting, because now we have all these programs, people can do things online, we have all these apps. So where does technology fit in accounting and in your business, and I guess where you think it's going to affect it negatively or positively?
Yeah, we've kind of touched on technology a few times through this conversation, but I mean, it won't be a negative or a replacement. If anything, it will be an added plus. Obviously, and we've talked about it this whole series when we've been talking to people in the industry, the effect of technology and, the cell phones, the connectability, email, Skyping, all that. That's all holds true in accounting. But the biggest place where accounting comes into play is, bookkeeping software, tax software. They think that eventually, since accounting is just numbers, eventually AI can take it over. But is AI going to tell you, what mileage is deductible or not, or if, some interpretive ideas on that? So if anything, technology makes the accountant's job way more efficient and way more cost effective for the client. And an example I used earlier in this conversation was one accountant today can do the bookkeeping for the same amount of clients that 6 accountants or bookkeepers were doing 15 years ago, because of programs like QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online, where it downloads transactions and all you're doing is placing those transactions and cleaning up the balance sheet. You're not doing this data entry. You're not doing these green ledger sheets of depreciation schedules. You got programs keeping that. So once you get it plugged in there and into the system, the stuff is carried over. You're not having to recopy or do any, manual input. But then your focus time is on the analysis. So that's why the accountant part of it is so important versus the bookkeeper side. Because a bookkeeper, anybody can do QuickBooks well and input transactions. But knowing that, hey, that's a cost of goods sold, or that's an expense, or we should get that liability, or call that a loan to shareholder, or let's clean this up and do different aspects like that. The bigger picture things, or the bigger planning of entity selection stuff, that's where an accountant comes in. So there's transactional accounting, but then there's
regulation and compliance. Hell, sometimes when you just get beyond the basic of debits and credits in your business, then you kind of need somebody to make sure you're doing everything and meeting all those regulations.
Well, there's 2 ways to kind of keep your books. There's what they call GAAP, which is generally accounting principles, generally accepted accounting principles, and then there's tax basis. Now, as a tax guy, if I'm doing your books at year end, I'm gonna do them to the tax basis of accounting. Do tax depreciation, things like that. But then if you're doing financial accounting, or you're doing audited financials, or you want to do something for the bank, they want to see it in GAAP, and it's a totally different presentation, and you're going to have to kind of know what the difference is.
I wasn't yawning because of you.
Okay, thanks, Mari.
So
the listeners didn't know, but now they do know that Mari's over here yawning.
Now, my next question and the last question I want to leave with is, what sort of advice would you give to, I guess, both the consumer and somebody thinking about entering the industry?
Yeah, so the consumer is
just Joe Blow.
Joe Blow going to look for an accountant. Obviously interview, obviously look for referrals. Referrals are a good source. I find a lot of people have only been with one accountant, and they should. Loyalty is key. You got to be good. You got to be loyal. You got to be happy. Happiness and the fit is the most important thing. But they don't know either how good they've got it or how bad they've got it if that's all they've seen. I'm not saying go out and interview, but sometimes I'll get referrals. Or new clients will come in and it's just different, and they didn't realize how much better it could have been. So just kind of keep that in mind. Interview your accountants. Just the bigger accounting firms, they're very good. You're going to have teams. If you're a big firm at a certain size of firm, you're going to have a bigger accounting firm, because you're going to need a team of 15 clients working on your stuff. That's one thing. But if you're a medium to smaller firm, just because they're a bigger accounting firm doesn't necessarily mean they'll be that fit for you. Because of that, at the end of the day, if you really want to have that connection and that dependability, you may lose that filter in the bigger accounting firm. However, that you may not, and I don't know. So you don't know the connection you're going to have. The interview, look for clients, see what they offer, ask them, if I try to get a hold of you, are you going to reply to my emails? How is that? Ask them what kind of advice they give. If that's a big part of what you're looking for, just ask about that. If I was talking to a college class right now, I would say I think accounting is a great career. It's you're in the room where it happens. You're very integrated. You have a great understanding and a foundation of business and where it's going. If you want to go into public accounting, I want to say certifications matter.
You have a lot of certifications.
I do, and that's what I'm getting at. So everybody just assumes if you're an accountant, you're a CPA, and that's just because. And that's fine. It's just a stereotype of the industry, one of them that, a CPA. But a CPA is just a certification you get. That's it. And it stands for Certified Public Accountant. You go to like the state AICPA, Association of CPA chapter, and you take a test, a 4-part exam, and you get your CPA certificate. It's not that easy, but that's what you do. You do have to have a college degree and everything, but there's other certifications, so one thing.
You're actually not a CPA.
I'm not. So I'm a enrolled agent, a certified fraud examiner, a certified valuation analyst. And I chose those to be niche certifications. The reason being is CPAs are great and they're, it's hard to get. It's very respectful. And if you're a CPA, you're going to have a very easy time finding a job. I promise you that. However, you can have a CPA that's a tax professional on one end of the spectrum, or you can have a CPA that's an auditor on the other end of the spectrum, or you may have a CPA in the middle, or a CPA that's done nothing but internal accounting. And I've met plenty of CPAs that couldn't even do their own tax return. And I've met other CPAs that only do taxes and don't know anything about, financial statement accounting or forensic accounting or whatever. So it's such a wide spectrum sometimes that if you just talk to a CPA, you sometimes might not know what you're going to get with that certification. Are they an internal accountant? Are they a tax accountant? Are they whatever? So within knowing that, when I was starting my career, I actually went after the CPA. But within that, I came across the EA because the firm I was in was a tax firm. The EA is an enrolled agent. It's a certification offered by the United States Department of Treasury. And it's a very tax-specific certification. So when it comes to taxes, you do everything a CPA does. So you represent before the IRS, you sign tax returns, but it is just tax and it's very niche and it's way more tax-specific than a CPA is. So if you meet an EA, I promise you they can do their own tax return. I promise you they know taxes. It's a 3-part exam, all on taxes. You have to have tax compliance checks by the IRS, all the above. So it's a very detailed thing. So when I was going into my career and I was like, I'm doing tax, I want to be niched. I want people to know I'm a tax guy. So I chose the EA. But then as my career progressed, I was like, well, I also want to get into forensic accounting. So I got my certified fraud exam, very niche certification on forensic accounting. And it's highly respected in that. And then as my career progressed, I wanted to do business valuations. So I got my certified valuation analyst, which is a business valuation certification, very niched in that. So I have very niche certifications within my realm. So if I know if a client wants a business valuation, I've got that niche. You go to a CPA, you don't know if they're going to do business valuations or not. They could, or they might not. They might say they do, but they don't, or I don't know, but it's, so CPA is a fantastic certification, but it's very broad and it's not very niche. But talking to college graduates.
Well, it's kind of, to me, the same as marketing. Marketing is very broad, but then there are people that get a graphic design degree. There are people that get, specific website certifications. There are people that get very, digital marketing is its own area. They might go get specializations in those. So, just because somebody says they do marketing does not mean, usually I get bombarded then with a bunch of questions. It doesn't mean that they do all those other things. So,
yeah.
I kind of see the relationship in that area.
But that being said, if you're in college and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, well, CPA is sort of the easy
The
answer.
generalist.
Because you will get, I've talked to plenty of other CPAs going into industry. If you have a CPA, you'll be in high demand. It's easy to get a job, in private or public industry. There's a high demand for CPAs. So if you want good career stability, get your CPA. It's a great advice. But with me, I didn't, I had a job, so I wasn't worried about that. So I went niche. And my niche certifications, I think, are equally as, the job security.
Sounds like you do, though, about 100 hours of continuing ed every year.
Yeah, and I'm working on another certification now.
So, in wrapping up, do you have anything that you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, hopefully, accounting, the industry is changing. I hope we can just, I've always said with my generation, I was born in 1978. So I was born for about 4 to 6 years. There was no video games, and suddenly there was video games, and I grew up with video games. The early 90s, there's no cell phones. They come along, so I started growing up with cell phones. The internet wasn't there. Suddenly I have it. So I had the benefit of seeing life, what it was like before, and life, what it was like after. And I'll use the term technology or modern technology. And I grew with this modern technology. And my career has been very similar. I've seen what life, I was at the very tail end of the old paradigm in accounting.
You kind of straddle both the millennial as well as Gen X.
Yeah. So I'm like right there in this weird sweet spot. They say there's like a 5 or 6 year special generation for where I'm at because I rode that wave. So I got to see, in the accounting industry specifically, I got to see what it was like for a year or two. But then as it changed and e-file and paperless and cell phones and apps and all that
grew. You could see the benefit of all
I grew
that
with it,
technology.
and I'm still relatively young in my industry. I'm 41, which isn't old, but it's not young. But I've got, another 20, 30 years in my career left at least of growing within this, and I'm riding that wave, which has been very cool to see. And I'm able to adapt and just carry things on. And as I grow with it. So it's...
Well, they say with your generation, actually, Gen X, and actually we're in the same one, you're just a little bit closer to the beginning or end of that part, is that we can actually, we're like the mediators between the boomers and the millennials. Because we understand all of the, I guess, complaints that boomers have about all this dang technology and people aren't personal anymore, and you've added back in the personal with making sure that you are accessible, that you're not relying on everything to be on a computer and so forth. You talk to a lot of your clients on a regular basis, and you are very accessible. And then yet we're also, and you are able to connect with the younger generation that does want to utilize that technology, that does want to see their accounting firm be efficient, and also come to them as well and be there and help them analyze. So I think it's a great place to be in. And not, like you said, it's a good sweet spot.
Yeah.
So thank you for that and giving us a more in-depth look into your industry. It's actually quite interesting. We started off with, Australian Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Well,
So thank you for joining us today. Please be sure to review this episode, and for more information on who we are or this podcast, please visit www.bammit.com. That's BAMM-IT.com. And join us for our last episode of the season 2, where we're going to wrap it up. And that's all I have to say, John Michael.
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
Looking forward to the season 2 wrap up, and thank you guys for listening.
All right, bye.
Bye.
The hosts and the guests of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice and is for entertainment purposes. It is not guaranteed that you will find this as entertaining as the hosts find themselves.